And so we're going to go through those today so that when you inevitably find a baby animal in your yard or at the park or otherwise, you're well equipped to deal with that and know if it needs help. As Janelle said, I'm from Nebraska Wildlife Rehab. Has anyone not heard of our organization? Cool, great, okay, awesome. So you will tonight. We are a rehabilitation center. We're just off, not too far actually here on 97th and M Street. 97th and L is the biggest crossroad by us. And what a rehabilitation center is, in terms of wildlife, is basically a veterinary hospital, right? So we have, I'll come back to this, but this is a picture of our center. We have full-scale vet hospital, everything you'd have for your dog or cat, you know, we've got for wildlife. We have a full-scale laboratory. We can run all kinds of samples in-house. We have a radiograph machine. We have a CT machine. We have a surgical suite and a full-scale veterinary staff that runs that. And that's just dedicated to our wild animals who become injured, which is pretty cool. For who we are and what we do, we specifically take care of native Nebraska wildlife. So a lot of people are like, oh, you work with wildlife, cool, like crocodiles and lions and stuff, right? And you got to think about stuff that's in your backyard, right? We work with your opossums, your raccoons, your songbirds, your squirrels. And we see them for varying different reasons. But what it comes down to is, I couldn't remember if I had a picture of it. What it comes down to is over 95% of our wild animal patients come to us because of human interaction in some way or another. So the argument has been brought before as to, you know, why don't you just let nature take its course? And we get that. We understand that, right? We're not here to pry the bunny out of the coyote's mouth. We're not here to help every single animal who has a disease, because disease is natural, it happens. But the impact that we have as humans on our wildlife is astronomical. And so we believe we have some responsibility to help mitigate some of those effects. Some of the examples of human interaction making an animal come into our clinic would be a collision with a vehicle. The other day we had collision with a bicycle, which is a little weird. I don't know how that happened. She hit a squirrel with her bike. You must have been biking really fast. Birds hitting windows, right? You probably all had that happen before. Taking a baby animal that you thought needed help and maybe didn't need help. That happens a lot, unfortunately. If you call us right away, we can help you to reunite it with your parents, their parents. We'll talk a lot about that tonight. Things we put in the environment, right? Even if you recycle and you put your recycling on the curb and it's really windy overnight and your recycling ends up everywhere, the stuff we make just ends up in nature, right? So things getting caught in pieces of litter, trash, ingesting things. We have a very high level of lead in our soil in Omaha, so we're seeing a lot of acute lead toxicity in different animals. And so these are all things that we can treat at our hospital. Our quick pop quiz, does anyone know what this is? A possum, good job. I'm gonna quiz you guys a lot tonight. I feel like you're really smart. You guys will do good. Our mission is not only to rescue, rehabilitate wild animals in Nebraska, but then to release them back to the wild. So that's another big part of us. You know, we're not farming animals out to zoos or sanctuaries. We're not keeping them as pets. We want them to go back into the wild from whence they came. And we, in a lot of species, try and get them back to their home territories as well. We also then want to educate people on why animals come to us, how we can prevent that from happening, and just how to coexist with animals as much as we can. Because at the end of the day, coexistence is going to be how we impact wildlife the least in our urban centers. That's another point too, right? A lot of our patients come from Omaha or Lincoln or large cities where we're populated, we're densely populated. There's not a lot of habitat for these guys. And so if we can learn more about the natural strategies and the life history of these guys, we can help support them. So, is there any questions about general Nebraska Wildlife Rehab stuff before we jump into our topic? Yes?
Endangered species, Nebraska.
We have... So generally the bat that you find in your house is not endangered. More often than not, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a big brown bat, which is not endangered, but it is federally protected. And we do have 2 species of bat, I think, that are endangered in Nebraska. And I can't remember the names off the top of my head. Yes, for the most part, the bats we get and the bats you find in your house are not endangered. Correct. No, they're federally protected. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you have a question? Yes, we are a nonprofit organization. So we do not receive funding from the state or from, U.S. Fish and Wildlife or Nebraska Game and Parks. We are a completely nonprofit organization. So you drop us injured animals, we'll fix them all up for free. Good point. Thank you. So 2 little things I want to teach to you tonight. So we're gonna learn some vocab words. They're ones you probably have heard before. The first one is precocial. A precocial animal is born somewhat developed. They require a little bit of care, but not as much as an animal that is altricial. So I want to think of altricial as like all the care, right? These are babies that you think of that are born naked. Their eyes are closed, their ears are closed. They are completely helpless. And so knowing whether a species is precocial or altricial can help you with, does that baby need help and what kind of help does it need? So precursor, 2 little things. Precocial, more developed. Altricial, all the care. You guys are experts on that now, right? Okay, great. First question, what is this? I heard yes. I heard, first of all, squirrel, which is correct. It is specifically an eastern fox squirrel, and I heard altricial. Yes, this guy is altricial, right? His eyes aren't open. His ears aren't open. He has no fur on his body. He is very helpless when he is born. So they require a lot of care from their mothers. And squirrels start us off in the night because they also start us off in the year. Historically, Valentine's Day has been the earliest we've ever gotten squirrels before. This year we got them like February 1st, right away. It was unprecedentedly early for getting baby squirrels. We're already in the midst of baby squirrel season. It is happening. We have probably about a dozen right now. And now is not a great time to be an animal that lives in trees. What do people like to do at this time of year with trees? Cut them down, right? It had the bad winter. You maybe saw it had some branches fall from the winter. It's a safety risk. Let's get it cut down. So unfortunately, it is very common for people to call us. A lot of times it's the tree cutter people, and they're like, hey, there's baby squirrels in this tree. What do I do? Thankfully, squirrels are one of the ones that we are pretty commonly able to reunite with their mother. So all you got to do is take those little baby squirrels, which you would think that if you cut down a tree and it fell, the baby squirrels would be injured, but in fact, that is generally not true. I don't know if they're just like bouncy or what, but they generally are fine. You want to put them in a cardboard box with a warm water bottle. And when all the hubbub has died down, so the tree cutters are done, they've moved on, they've cleaned up, no one is in the area, you can put that cardboard box with that baby squirrel in it either beside where the tree was or even right on that tree stump. And mom can come, she'll take her baby and she'll move it to a new location. Oftentimes she has backup drays, or the fancy word for squirrel nest. So she can come, she'll take that baby, she'll take it to a new location, and it's all great. Mother knows best, right? Something I always have to remind people is you can't really buy squirrel milk on Amazon. So when we get these species, it's hard to take care of them. We don't know exactly what proponents of milk they need and how many times they need to be fed. Like, we've scientifically studied these animals and we found what best works in captivity, but it's never going to be as good as the care that mother can give. And so when we can keep the animal with mom, that's what we want to do. They have 3 to 5 babies, once to sometimes twice a year. And when we have good temperatures, like probably this year, they might have 2 or maybe even a 3rd litter later in the year. And then, yeah, this time of year isn't great because people are cutting down their trees. And also there's a lot of storms, right? And then limbs fall. So once again, they're up in trees, they fall down. For whatever reason, when they get to kind of this stage, they also are not afraid of people. And so if they get separated from their mom, they might just like follow your child around or your dog because they're like confused in life. But Once they fall out of the nest, if we can't reunite them with the mother, you can call us and we can absolutely raise and rehabilitate them. We do have a pretty good success rate with squirrels. And once again, it's also less of a burden on us too if we can keep them with mom. Their eyes open at 3 weeks, and then at about 6 weeks, they start exploring outside of the nest. Any questions about squirrels? Yes.
You're not supposed to touch them with your hands. Should you use gloves?
That's a good question. So I'll talk about this. I'll say this several times tonight because I don't know how this myth started in society that like if you touch a baby animal, its mom will like smell you and then like abandon the animal. There's a disease risk, right? So you don't want to handle animals for that reason. But for the reason of abandonment by the mother, there is no animal that I know of, at least in North America, that is going to just abandon their baby because it smells funny, or because it was messed with or handled. Animal mothers put in a large amount of care and resources and time into their babies, and so it takes a lot for them to just up and abandon them. Another thing we hear too is like, oh, the mom just kicked it out of the nest for whatever reason. That generally doesn't really happen in nature unless something is very, very wrong. So yes, if you're like, oh, my cat handled this baby bird and now it's gonna smell like cat and you're worried about that, don't worry about that. It's not a thing. I don't know if like moms were trying to shame their children into like not touching animals. I don't know how that started. But yes, it is a myth for sure. That being said, animals carry diseases, so I wouldn't touch them with their bare hands, but like gloves, even a washcloth or something similar is definitely appropriate if it needs to be moved. Don't just touch animals for fun. It's a little stressful for them. What is this? A deer. Is it precocial or altricial? Yeah, this is kind of a tough one. So he is technically considered to be precocial. He's born, he's covered in fur, he can stand, he needs to be taken care of by mom, but he is pretty set up to do things right away. He can generally stand and walk within a few hours of birth. It's a mammal, needs to drink milk from mom, needs to be with mom. But what we don't understand about deer as humans is that we would never go to the grocery store and leave our baby home alone. We never go to the grocery store and leave our baby in the car for a long, hopefully, a long amount of time, right? But animals do this all the time. They will go out and forage. They will leave their baby alone. They will not be in the area. And they're doing that on purpose. That does not mean the animal is abandoned. That does not mean the animal is orphaned. White-tailed deer will stash their babies in an area that they deem safe. That could be behind your air conditioning unit. That could be at a park. What they deem safe is not necessarily what we deem safe. So you kind of got to trust her and just stay away from the area. It is not uncommon for them to not then come and see their babies for sometimes up to 8 to 12 hours. So deer are what we call crepuscular. Crepuscular means it's an animal that's most active at dawn and dusk. And so we find that most commonly they'll come visit their fawn and feed their fawn at dawn and at dusk. Otherwise, they're not going to hang out by this baby. There's a reason Bambi is shown as being so gangly and awkward. Deer are gangly and awkward. They have long legs. They don't know how to control them yet. So if mom is out foraging and comes across a coyote, she can get away, right? This guy can't, and she can't like put him on her back and run away. So it's safer for deer to stash their babies and stay away from them. Relative to her as well, this guy doesn't have a lot of scent. He's not going to make a lot of noise. He might make a few little bleats here and there, but he's much safer from predators away from her, stashed, than with her. So unfortunately, this is tough because this happens every year in Nebraska where you find a deer, you keep an eye on it, you're like, oh, it's been like 3 hours, haven't seen mom. And so people bring them into their house because they're so cute and they keep them in their bathtub and they feed them goat's milk for 7 days. And then they call us and they're like, oh, well, I rescued this deer like 3 days ago. But really, it probably wasn't orphaned, right? It wasn't abandoned. It was fine. And after a couple days, we can't reunite it with its mother. Unfortunately, in our state, and there's a lot of reasons for this, but it's illegal for us to rehabilitate deer. So unfortunately, when it gets to that point, when people have had it for 7, 8 days, there's not a lot we can do. So this is my plea to anyone who goes on Facebook this spring and sees the person who inevitably found a deer and wants to take it home. Tell them not to do that. Give us a call. We can help them decipher if the deer does need help. It happens sometimes, and what needs to be done. So fawns stashed by their mother, it's okay if they're alone for many hours at a time. If that fawn is wandering in the street, bleeding and crying, something is going on, right? But for the most part, if it's just quiet, it's tucked away, it is safe.
You can't reunite them because the mother's given up on them.
Yeah, if it's like 24 hours, maybe even 48 hours later, we'll try, and it can happen. But if it's been a couple days, she's probably not going to be in the area. Yeah, depending on, it's all situational, right? If someone calls and they're like, oh, I have the same deer in my yard every 2 days, like we'll try. Like maybe she is hanging out in the area. But for the most part, a lot of them, more the non-urban ones, but are going to be somewhat migratory. They're moving around, and so if their baby's been gone for a couple days, they're going to think that it got taken by a predator. Who is this? Oh, it came up. Gosh dang it. I keep needing to fix that, and I never do. Well, are they altricial or precocial? Yeah, right. This is how they're born. They're the size of a jelly bean. They are just an amorphous little blob of skin cells. They don't even have fully developed eyes yet. Does anyone know what's unique about opossums that is the reason why their babies are born so undeveloped? Yeah, right? There are nations only marsupials. They're the only animals in North America that will continue their development in a pouch. So they're born, they have to crawl from the birth canal up into mom's pouch where they continue their development. As you can tell, when we get possums that are like this size and the size of a jelly bean, it's very hard to raise them. Um, People do find dead opossums on the side of the road, and they'll stop and check to see if they have babies. And we will definitely do our best, but this kind of tiny little animal is very hard to rehabilitate, as you can imagine. However, as they start to develop in the pouch and they get to this age, it's a little bit easier. So they are marsupials, they're extremely altricial, and the cool thing about opossums is that they are extremely good mothers. So this is kind of the one animal where I tell people that they should be with their moms 24/7. If you find a baby opossum and it's on its own, something is potentially wrong. However, once they are the size of a soda can, from their nose to their rump, maybe it's better on this one, so not including their tail, but their nose to their rump, size of a soda can, they are big enough to start venturing on their own. So that's where we really get a little confusion of like, is it a baby opossum or is it a juvenile? Because they start like this, they start really teeny tiny. So when they're able to go on their own, they're still pretty small. They're going to fall in your window wells. Your dog's going to catch them. But as long as they're uninjured, you can just release them on their merry way. As you can see, nature's minivan. Once they even come out of the pouch, mom will continue to carry them on her back for a long amount of time. Litter size, they can have up to 10 to 20 babies, but understandably, that's because a lot of them don't survive from that teeny tiny neonate state. So ones that successfully come out of her pouch, we're looking more around the 5 to 8 range. Question about opossums. Cool. Okay. What are these? Your favorite, right? Yeah, they're garter snakes, specifically. Are they precocial or altricial? Altricial. They are snakes. It's kind of hard to tell from the picture. Um, they are precocial. So all reptiles and amphibians are born precocial. All reptiles and amphibians get no parental care in Nebraska, not over the world. In Nebraska, reptiles and amphibians do not receive parental care. They just are born, they have to know what to do right away, which is kind of insane to me. These tiny little spaghetti noodles have to be born, They're actually born live, which is interesting. They're not from an egg. They have to go out in the world, they have to find shelter, they have to hide from predators, they have to find insects and hunt for themselves from day one, which is really cool. In Nebraska, some snakes are born in eggs, and then some do give live birth, like the garter snake. This is where I like to give my standard caveat that yes, we do have venomous snakes in Nebraska, but it is very, very rare to come into contact with them in Omaha or Lincoln. We have really only received one wild venomous snake, and it was a copperhead, which is the least venomous of the 4 that we have. And it was found more in kind of like a rural area of the city anyways. So don't worry too much about running into rattlesnakes in town. It's not going to happen. There's this myth I hear every so often too that I always like to address, that baby rattlesnakes are more dangerous because they don't know how to like manage how much venom they give to their prey. So they might like dump all their venom into you when they bite, and that's not necessarily true. There hasn't really been any studies scientifically that have been peer-reviewed that support that thesis. And the cool thing about copperheads is when they're babies, they have these little highlighter yellow tails, which I think is adorable. So another thing to keep in mind too is that snakes often look very different when they're young than as they do for an adult. So I get calls a lot about this guy, right? He's got a diamond pattern, like obviously a rattlesnake. But he's not. He's actually this guy, which is the black rat snake, who is totally harmless. He will climb up your trees and eat bird eggs, but it's a circle of life. But he's totally black, right? And people see this black snake and they're like, okay, it's a rat snake, it's fine. But they don't see that when they see this guy. So sometimes the babies can look very different from the adults that we generally envision, except for garter snakes. Garter snakes always just kind of look like garter snakes. So that is snakes. From there, we go to this guy. Who is this? Yes, these are raccoons. I'm hearing some mumblings. Raccoons, are they altricial, needing all the care, or precocial? Yeah, it's hard to see. But yes, they do have some fur, but their eyes are closed, their ears are closed. They do need a lot of care from their mothers, so they are considered to be an altricial species. And as you can see from this photo, raccoons like to have their babies where we live. So in the wild, raccoons are captivity or cavity dwellers. So a cavity in the wild would maybe be like a hollow tree or a cave or a small burrow in the ground. We don't let a lot of those things exist in our city. You know, hollow trees get cut down, holes get filled in and landscaped. We don't really have a lot of caves, but we do have a lot of attics. We have a lot of sheds. We have a lot of balconies and decks. And so those things raccoons have adapted to serve this purpose for raising their babies. So, they do stay with their mother then for over 2 months, and she teaches them to hunt and to climb. Sometimes they can even stay with their mothers for up to a year, just kind of learning how to raccoon. This is where I like to tackle another couple urban myths. One of them is that, you know, if you see a nocturnal animal out during the day, that it is diseased or potentially rabid. That is not true. Certainly, if a nocturnal animal that's supposed to be active at night is diseased, it might be out during the day. But much more commonly, what we find is that that animal had a to-do list that was a little bit too long for the nighttime, and so they just find themselves out in the day. Especially in the springtime, animals are coming out of hibernation. They're needing to really stock up on food. They're maybe needing to alter their shelter situation. They're maybe needing to get food for their babies. They've got a lot of stuff to do. And so just like us, where we are diurnal or active during the day, sometimes we're active at night. Sometimes raccoons, active during the day, will be up, or up during the day, will be up at night, will be up during the day, right? So it's not necessarily that you need to call us and like report, oh, raccoon's up during the day, it's rabid. It's probably just got stuff to do. Leave it alone, it'll be fine. Secondarily, this was a big one a couple years ago, but on YouTube, everyone was showing the videos of the raccoons like washing their food, and people were talking about how they're so clean and they're like cleaning their food out, and it's so great. What is actually happening is raccoons' primary sense is their tactile features or their sense of touch. And we find that when our touch receptors are wet, you can feel things even better. And so what raccoons will do is they'll dunk things in water and they'll feel them. They'll be able to feel them better, learn more about their food, and they'll also just forage at the edge of water a lot, find crawdads, frogs, stuff like that. So that's just kind of a cool thing about raccoons. They're generally born from April into May, and we generally just see one cycle of raccoons, but it can go for kind of long. We have had some baby raccoons as late as September, but like I said, it's generally more in the springtime because they know they got to spend some time with their kits to get them into being adults and adult, mature trash pandas. Questions about raccoons? Yes. Not generally. So they will live in family units in the summer, and then generally they disperse throughout the winter. That being said, though, like I said, sometimes moms will stay with one or two of their kits throughout the winter if they need a little bit more time with mom. And then in mating season, you'll see males and females together, but otherwise they're not generally communal. So why we see that in town is because there is a large food source in the area or resource that is supporting a lot of the raccoons. So we see this a lot around like feral cat colonies, people who put out a large amount of food in their backyard for all animals. Anytime there's a lot of resources, you're going to see a lot of these animals that aren't communal together just because there's a lot of food. Yeah.
Area and I have a compost pile.
Hmm?
Inside the small dog. Should I be doing something with my compost pile to not?
If you just have one, I wouldn't worry about it. Yeah. No, for sure. I'm just saying, like, if you're feeding one raccoon, I wouldn't be too worried about it. If you're all of a sudden there's like 12 raccoons that live in the neighborhood because of your compost pile, then I would start to address it. But if you just have one that's taking advantage of it every once in a while, I would be fine with it. Okay, moving on to this guy. Who is this? A little turtle, teeny tiny turtle. So I don't know what kind of turtle. Even herpet. Ooh, so close. It's not a red-eared slider, but it looks like that. It's a painted. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to tell when it's a baby too. Turtles, precocial or altricial?
You said all reptiles, right?
I did. Yes, all reptiles and amphibians are precocial, right? So same thing, turtles, moms come out, they lay the eggs, they're done. They go live their happy turtle lives. Baby turtles got to figure out what to do from day one, which is kind of crazy intense. Here's the thing about turtles. In Nebraska, all our turtles, even the aquatic ones, lay their eggs on land. For whatever reason, female turtles like to choose this one specific spot that once again makes sense to them, probably doesn't make sense to us, and they go there every year to lay their eggs. So what happens is, in the spring and the summer, turtles all of a sudden are out on the roadway, even turtles that live in the water. Why is that? Why would they come out just in the spring and summer and not any other time? They're laying their eggs, right? It's a female, and she's going to lay her eggs. So it makes sense. Did I put a picture? No, I did not. It makes sense to like be like, oh, turtle, what are you doing in the road? I'm gonna pick you up and then take you back over here and put you in the pond. But if it's a female who's laying her eggs, which 9 times out of 10 it is, she's just gonna keep coming out of that pond and attempting to cross that street. So the best thing you can do if you find a turtle in the road and you want to help is carefully pick them up and take them the direction they were going. And a lot of times this is confusing because maybe they're leaving a nice pond and they're going to like a children's playground. But she's just going to keep trying to go there. And if we try and intervene, she's not going to be having it. She's going to keep trying to lay her eggs there no matter what. This picture was they were going to demolish this grass space from our parking lot. So we had to remove and artificially incubate some snapping turtle eggs. Even though they already had like construction equipment and they were pulling up the cement, she came anyways, and the workers just watched her just lay her eggs right there. So they're headstrong. They will do it no matter what. Moving turtles, obviously the snapping turtle, might be a little difficult. If you have a car mat in your car, you can kind of hold on the back of their carapace, so kind of back here, and just slip them on the car mat and then pull the car mat across the street with you. If it is a small turtle, you can hold once again on the back of their top shell. We just ask you don't pick them up by their tails because their tails can break. That's the easiest way. You can also just like usher them across the road. But yes, turtles, they wreak havoc in the spring and summer. So unfortunately, a lot of times they get hit by cars, and cars are a lot bigger than turtles. So it's not generally always a great thing. But once the turtles are born, then they have to get to the water and figure out how to do their life, which is kind of cool because they're snack sized. How they do that, I don't know. It's crazy. But yes, reptiles and amphibians have to go through crazy feats to get to adulthood. Questions so far? Okay, awesome. Who's this? Robins. Yeah, good job. Generally, people are just like birds, but yeah, you always all know robins like blue, right? They even kind of look like robins here, starting a little bit. Are robins altricial or precocial? Yeah, this cannot help itself. An egg is pretty defenseless, so they're very altricial, right? And this is songbirds, I should say. Waterfowl, a little bit different. But songbirds are born very altricial. They're in a nest, and they go through these kind of two stages. So from the egg, they turn into nestlings. Nestlings live in a nest. They're kind of like downy. They can't like stand up very well. They're very wobbly. This guy, if you find it on the ground and it is uninjured, you can just pop him back in the nest and mom will continue to take care of him. Do I have? I do. Okay. So if the nest is really, really high up or the nest has fallen apart, say in a rainstorm, you can make an artificial nest and set it up, and she will continue to take care of her original nest if it's still standing and the new nest. As long as she can hear her babies, mother birds are a lot better mothers than we give them credit for, right? We've all heard that like moms will kick their babies out of the nest, they'll give them tough love. They don't really do that. The next stage of life is fledgling, and fledglings need to learn how to fly. These guys are hoppy. They might be seated, but they'll hop around. They do jump out of the nest, and they can and should, they normally should be grounded and not be able to fly for sometimes up to 3 days while they're learning. And so that's where this gets confusing because people see this little guy, he looks grumpy, and he's got these tufts, and they're like, you should be in a nest. And if you put him in a nest, he's gonna jump right back out. But they're like, you're not flying, you're just like cat bait for the neighborhood cat. And like, yeah, that's entirely true. So unfortunately, you know, you gotta keep an eye out. Maybe if it's in your backyard with your dog, just kind of escort him to the front yard. At this stage, mom and dad are often still taking care of them. They're still feeding them, but they don't need to be in a nest. So backing up just a little bit, if you do find a nestling that should be in a nest, one of my favorite things is taking these like containers that you buy strawberries in at the grocery store. That could be anything. It could be a Cool Whip container. Just make sure it has holes so it doesn't turn into a pool if it rains. Robins can't swim very well. And you put it at least 5 feet up in the nearest tree or bush to the original nest. And so it doesn't have to be in the same tree. I like to say within 10 or 20 yards. The idea is we want mom to hear those babies, right? If she can hear those babies and they're hers, if they're the same species, she will feed them. And so even if there's 3 babies in the original nest in the tree over here, and I made this makeshift nest and I put it in this bush over here, she'll take care of both. And this might seem like a lot of work to you, and like maybe it's just easier to take them to our facility. But baby birds at that nestling age should be fed every 15 minutes. And in the summertime, when we have 400 of them, that's just like all we're doing is we start from the beginning and then we feed the baby birds, and you start at the beginning and you feed the baby birds from 8 a.m. until midnight. And so once again, if you can help us out and try and keep them with mom, right? That's going to be what's best for them in the long run anyways. They will get to the stage where they're fledglings. They're going to get in trouble. They're going to be hopping around your front yard. They don't really care about humans. They might hop up to you. So if you do need to just gently scoop them up, put them near somewhere else, away from kids, away from cats or dogs, that is completely acceptable. They're going to be in the ground for 3 days. It's tough, right? Nature is hard. But they got to learn how to fly, and they got to do it on their own. So that is kind of a natural time that is kind of confusing to us. We think birds should be able to fly, and if they can't fly, they should be in a nest. That's not necessarily true. So you can keep an eye on them. 3 days, like I said, often mom or dad, they might not be right there. But if you go inside your house and wait a little bit, you'll notice adult birds visiting that bird, making sure it gets fed, maybe being like, hey, hop closer this way. Look at how I take off and fly. Because yeah, baby bird mothers get a bad rap, but they're actually pretty exceptional mothers, except for cowbird moms. Does anyone know what cowbirds do? Yeah. Yeah, they're brood parasites. So they just go and they lay their eggs in someone else's nest, and then they're like, I'm done. You can raise my babies. So if you ever see a nest and there's like a couple little blue eggs and then this giant speckled egg, it's a cowbird egg. It's funny. You'll see these birds, like mom birds, taking care of a baby that's like bigger than it. It's interesting. So making the makeshift nest, putting nestlings back in their nest, we're all good on that. That'll make sense. Beautiful. Who are these? Rabbits. I always kind of think they look like little hippos. They look like 10 little hippos, so their little ears. This guy's got some nail polish on his ear because we like to keep litters together, but keep the individuals distinct so we know if one's losing weight or not eating well. So we put a little bit of dye on their ear. These are rabbits. Are they altricial or precocial? Altricial, right? Their eyes are closed, their ears are closed. They have a little bit of fur, but not a ton. Here's the thing with rabbits. When people think of rabbit nests, they think of this like beautiful velveteen rabbit like burrow into the ground that's like padded with fur. And in reality, that's not what rabbit nests look like. They're sometimes just a shallow little dugout part in the earth. Sometimes they're barely even covered. Sometimes it's just like dirt and there's not even grass there. Rabbits sometimes are just like, well, this is where I have my babies. This is where I'm going to keep them now. And so what might be their nest doesn't look like a nest to us. So what happens is people find, a grouping of baby bunnies just in the dirt, and they're like, what happened? But once again, what makes sense to us what makes sense to them probably doesn't make sense to us. So they are another one of our most commonly kidnapped animals. People will bring them in because they're like, oh, I just found them. Like if you find them in the concrete, that's probably not great. But if you find them in dirt or mulch or a grass pile with like nothing on them, that's not necessarily mean they're abandoned. That could just mean that's what the mom decided to have as her nest. Rabbits grow up very quickly. So a lot of times the good thing is people are like, I don't want this in my yard. I have a dog or a cat. They'll generally be out within like 11 to 17 days. They're very hard for us to care for. Rabbits do not really have a suckling reflex, and thus they have to be tube fed in captivity, which, as you can imagine, is like really invasive for their teeny tiny little bodies. So this is one where we really do ask people to help us just keep them with their parents because it's such a better survival rate if they stay with their moms. And it's hard because I get it. Like I got a hunting dog at home, and so when we get baby rabbits in our backyard, that's not great. Like my dog is not trained to not catch those rabbits. But there are a couple things we can do. They just take a little bit of your time. I'm going to back up to that. This is, first of all, my dog-proof enclosure. That works for my dog. It might be different. Then there's a laundry basket. It has one of these little slats cut out, and then I actually put more than just rocks because she'd topple that over, but I'll put like bags of mulch and bags of soil on top, even maybe put them on the side so she can't like stick her paw in there and grab at them. And mom doesn't care. She'll keep coming every single day. She'll keep caring for her babies as long as there's a hole for her to access. Another one I thought I had a picture of is a lot of times when you buy dog or cat kennels, they come apart like in half horizontally. And in fact, we have a ton of those that if you're like, hey, I can't keep my dog or cat away from bunnies, you can just come, we'll give it to you for free. You can put it over top of the bunnies and it's got a little hole for them and you just put heavy stuff on top of it. Worst case scenario, if your dog is really incorrigible, if you have to walk them on a leash in your backyard for, a week and a half, if you can find it that in your heart to do that and take that time for your bunnies, keeping them with their mom is just what's truly best for them, especially in Eastern Cottontails, species-specific care. So this is another one where mom is not going to stay with her babies. And a lot of times people find baby bunnies in their backyard and they're like, I've never even seen an adult rabbit in my backyard. Like, how did they get here? That means she's doing her job, right? She's staying away. She knows that she is a target for predators, so she is not going to be with her babies except for a couple minutes at dawn and at dusk. So, yes, so this is what you can do if you think they're abandoned. You can sprinkle flour around the outside of the babies. This isn't my favorite because if it rains, it's going to wash away. I prefer if you get thin floss, dental floss, embroidery yarn, something like that, and putting in a tic-tac-toe pattern over the nest, over the babies. If after 24 hours it has not been touched or it's just been jostled slightly, then potentially, yes, the nest has been abandoned. But if this has been kind of pushed to the side, it is not abandoned. So this is another one where you can sit and watch this nest for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, and you might not see an adult rabbit, and that is okay. So another thing in our heads as humans, we think, oh, babies eat a lot, right? They eat like every 15, 20 an hour, minutes, whatever. Animal babies don't necessarily eat that often, right? They could eat once a day, and they're gonna be fine. So that's the other thing too, is when people find baby animals, their instinct is to feed them. They're like, it needs food, it needs water, it's probably dehydrated. And if you found someone like sick and bleeding on the side of the road, your first instinct wouldn't be to give them a sandwich, right? Like, they need medical care. They don't need food necessarily. And so we always tell people, if you do find a baby animal, don't give them food, don't give them water. It's fine. It's good. They're going to be okay. Even if it's overnight, it's okay. We just want to keep them warm and we want to keep them in a somewhat non-stressful situation. So that means place where it's quiet, place where it's dark, and then give us a call. So yes, this is how you can check to see if they're abandoned. It truly does not happen very often unless, say, the mom gets hit by a car or something. We do get calls of like, hey, I have a baby bunny nest in my backyard and there's a dead rabbit in the road out front. Can I bring him in? We also want to say that we never want to assume that that same animal is the mom, right? Even if you don't see a lot of rabbits, there could be a lot of rabbits, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're orphaned. Does that all make sense? Rabbits are a sticky subject every summer. Everyone's gonna find them. Yeah, it's tough. And so that's another thing too. So once they get to be the size of a tennis ball and their ears are perked up, which is really small, right? That's like this big. They're good to be on their own. They don't need to be with their moms. And if you need to scoop it up and escort it out of your yard, that is fine. So at that point in time, this is where I would take this little guy, I'd shoo him into a shoebox, and then I'd take him outside my yard. You can move him up to 100 yards away, but we prefer you not move them farther than that because they do want to stay in their home territories, which is something we'll talk about more in a little bit here. Cool. So, reunification process, how to keep them with dogs. Common misconceptions. So I talked about all of these, but I just want to hit them again because you hear them so many times that people just think they must be true. Wild babies are very rarely truly orphaned or abandoned. There is not a lot that's going to happen for a mom to just give up on her children. If it's a species that requires care, unless something happens to her and she dies, She's not gonna just like give up on her babies for some reason. Generally does not happen. My child, dog, cat, neighbor, etc. touched this animal, and now it smells like humans. What should I do? Once again, people say this with songbirds, which is very perplexing to me because some birds have a sense of smell, but especially like robins, they really have a very, very poor sense of smell. So there's no way that they can smell that a human or a cat has touched their baby. So yeah, I don't know how that started, but it's okay. If you touch it, if your 5-year-old's been running around with a baby rabbit, it's okay. Just put it back in the nest. Nocturnal animals awake in the day must be sick or diseased. Not to say that that can't happen, but is generally not what is going on. If you have any questions, if something else is going on, maybe it has some other symptom where you think it's diseased, you can always give us a call. Okay, so then if babies are rarely orphaned, how do they come to our care? So we get thousands of baby animals every year. And some common things that happen are our pets, right? We love our pets. We don't get our cats or dogs to hurt wildlife, but they do. And that is the top cause of admission for baby animals last year in 2023. A big one is cats. Cats have this bacteria in their saliva and it's on their claws. It can cause, if you've ever heard cat scratch fever in humans, it can be harmful to us as well, but it is deadly in birds and small mammals. So that's why we say if your dog nicks a baby bunny, we might be like, yeah, still reunited, it's probably fine. But if a cat has been playing with a baby animal, we pretty much always want to see it because we want to get it started on antibiotics. This was a picture that was done by National Geographic a couple years ago. This was killed by one house cat in this one person's yard in 1 year. Even well-fed house cats will kill other animals. It's just what they do. We love them. It's just who they are. So if you can find it to keep your cats indoors and find other enriching, stimulating things for them to do other than be outside on a leash, you're going to help a lot of bird species and wildlife in general. Trapping and releasing. So when I was a kid, it was generally understood that if you trapped this raccoon, in an urban neighborhood and you took it out to like Fontenelle Forest, it was going to have a better life, right? Because it's like a park where there's lots of resources and uninterrupted nature. But in the past decade or so, a lot of studies have been coming out that there is an 80% or higher mortality rate with these animals if they are relocated more than 100 yards from their current habitat. So 100 yards is the size of a football field. So if you need to trap and relocate, an animal to a football field's type of space away, that is fine. Reasons you might do this is because you trap this guy in your attic, and then while it's making its way back, you quickly cover your attic up the entrance or exit holes. But yeah, we say this is not really an effective solution because 100 yards, they're just going to be back in a couple hours. And then also in Nebraska, the Game and Parks realizes this and they understand these studies and that they're legitimate. And so it is actually illegal interstate, and a lot of people don't know this, but it's illegal interstate to relocate mammals more than 100 yards away. It's also illegal to relocate amphibians and reptiles more than 50 yards away. Interestingly. And that's all because there's all these case studies coming out that show how important a home territory is to an animal. And where in our mind, like Fontenelle might seem like a haven for wildlife, in actuality, that animal all of a sudden doesn't know where to find water. It doesn't have a stable source of shelter. It doesn't know where conspecifics or others of its species are living in the area. It might be dropped into someone else's territory. It might be dropped into an area with different diseases. This is a big one with raccoons. We have a lot of diseases that raccoons have in urban centers that have not spread out to rural areas since we don't want to be intermixing those types of things. And last but not least, it happens every year, a couple times, where someone's like, hey, I just took this raccoon out to Timbuktu, and now I have 3 babies in my attic. And I didn't know she was a mom, and I'm really sorry, but now there's nothing I can do, and there's nothing we can do, right? We just have to take them in and raise them, which is fine. But if we can not orphan baby raccoons, that's always preferable. Questions about that? Cool. However, as much as we want to coexist with wildlife, it is not always easy. I understand as a homeowner, wildlife can cause a lot of damage. They can cause a lot of mental damage if there's screaming in your attic 24/7 and things are going on. So we have compiled on our website. So our website, there's some stickers at both tables, I believe, and I have some as well. It's just nebraskawildliferehab.org. The wildlife help tab, we've compiled by species what we find to be the most effective and ethical solutions for nicely evicting your nature neighbors from your backyard or home. For example, one with raccoons, they're very sensitive to auditory stimuli. So if you put, it's an old adage, people don't think it works, but it really does. If you put a radio in your attic or your shed and play it really loud, talk music 24/7, mom raccoons, often also like squirrels, will have a backup nest location. And so if she's like, oh, all of a sudden there's predators here, and I feel it, I deem it unsafe, she'll move them to a new location, and it's fine. It's all great. She did it on her own. And so, yeah, a lot of these things are going to be deterrents, right? Things to deter the animal, have it move on its own. You can also just call us, and we can walk you through those as well. And then the last thing I have today is just a quick going through, does an animal need help? Here's what you're going to ask yourself. If you find a baby animal, the first thing is it injured? If it's injured, we want to see it at the clinic, right? We want our veterinary care staff to assess what's going on. And my next slide, I believe, is how to tell if a baby animal's injured. That probably could have been first. If it is injured, call us. Do not give it food or water. Just keep it warm, right? It doesn't need to be fed. Don't worry. Their body's in shock. They don't need a sandwich. The question then, if it's not injured, is it orphaned? And to know that, that's kind of hard because you got to know the species. So we talked through some of the common ones tonight. We talked through whether it's normal for them to be alone on their own, what size it's normal for them to be alone on their own. You're probably not going to remember everything I said today, and that's totally fine. Yeah, feel free to take a picture. I think my end slide has this a lot bigger. Our hotline, we're open 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. A lot of times we're in the back taking care of animals, so I always tell people, please leave a voicemail. We will get back to you within the hour. Because, yeah, you got to know, does it receive parental care? If it does, if something's going on, it's by itself. Baby opossums shouldn't be alone. Baby bunnies, that's totally fine. Well, I thought I had a slide. But basically, knowing if a baby animal is injured is pretty easy. Thinking about your pet. If it is limping or not using a wing or a leg. If there's a large tract of hair or feathers missing. If there's blood. If there are insect eggs or a large amount of insects like flies or ants, that's a not very good thing. And if a baby animal is cold to the touch, that is generally something that warrants medical care too. So the kind of the big ones for telling if a baby animal is injured, because a lot of times they're just kind of laying there comatose and they seem like they're dead, but they're just sleeping. So with that is the end of my presentation. I have our email. If you ever want anything identified, if you have like photos, that's a good way to send us stuff. Our hotline, once again, every day from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Our website, and then if you just like looking at cute photos of baby animals, our Facebook, we post a lot of that stuff on there. So feel free to take a photo of that. And with that, we'll start our question and answer.
I have a question.
Yes. Yes.
But I don't like snakes. But you said that garden snakes, you said that garden snakes only they have live birds. Is it just one at a time?
It is not. It is like 30 plus.
One.
Yes. Well, but here's the thing. So you don't know, like, yes, if she just had birth, there's going to be a lot. But those tiny little spaghetti noodles are quick. And so they can get kind of far fast. And so you ostensibly might find just one on its own. And I think that it could just be that one. Yes. We do, absolutely. So here's the thing. I'm going to put a caveat on this. We're currently hiring a new volunteer coordinator. So volunteering is kind of up in the air just right now. But if you go to our website, under the How You Can Help tab, there's a volunteer application. get it filled out, and once we get that volunteer coordinator hired, which we're well underway hiring that person, they will go through all of those applications, and we will be having trainings in the spring. When you volunteer for us, you will be working with animals, and that does require a lot of training, as you can imagine. So there are some training opportunities you have to go through before you can come into the center and begin your volunteering. We also have college internship programs, if anyone knows any college students. Yes.
I can speak pretty loud. No, did I miss it or did we not? I have a fox.
I didn't cover foxes. Yeah, foxes are another one where people don't consider them as like city animals, and so we get a lot of calls, right? That they shouldn't be there and they need to be relocated, but it's happening every year, right? And 72nd and Dodge, right? There's like a baby fox den. And so, yeah, we generally what we tell people is they're not dangerous to human or pets as long as we don't approach them. They will come out, they're playful, just kind of leave them alone, let them do their thing. They stay in their dens this time of year, but in the summer they'll start coming out, kind of learning from mom what to do. For the most part, urban foxes and coyotes, even eating your chihuahua is going to be a little too much work for them. So they're going to be eating more things like baby bunnies, small mammals, mice. They're also omnivores. People forget too that foxes will also eat berries, food forage, plant forage, fish, stuff like that. Is there anything else that I didn't answer about foxes that you were thinking specifically? Okay. Yeah, yes.
Near where they were found or how you back well?
Absolutely. So when animals are ready to leave rehab, we take them, if it's a mammal that's an adult, we take it back to within 100 yards of the location that it was found at. So that being said, if you have a mangy squirrel, you bring it to us, it's going to be back in your backyard in a couple months. And that's a good thing, right? You want him to be with his friends, you want him to be back in his own territory. Baby animals, it's not necessarily crucial. They haven't really established their home territory. That being said, baby animals that are raised with us, right? So we have a couple areas, some being like public parks, that we will release baby animals. Birds, we also go, a lot of times we'll just go to the exact address the bird was found and just release it from our cars right there. And yes, all animals we want to release to their home territory unless it's a baby, and then it's a little bit different. Yes.
Why? Couple days ago. Is there a certain way you're supposed to get rid of them?
Was it really dead? Um, yeah, so it's always tough. I always tell people, first of all, it's hard to tell if animals are dead, and so maybe just let it sit for like 12 hours. Second of all, in Nebraska, in Omaha, the correct way to dispose of a wildlife carcass is just to double bag it and put it in your city trash. So, if you don't want to touch it, you can call the Humane Society. They're probably not going to come out. Sorry. So I just recommend getting like a shovel, just kind of putting into something. But yes, it's kind of hard to tell sometimes if things are like a possum playing dead, or maybe it's in torpor. A lot of people find bats or 13-line ground squirrels over winter that they believe are dead, but they're actually in like hibernation state. So that's one of the things. If you ever have questions, you can give us a call as well. Yes.
I'm pretty sure I read I'll say I think I read on the Nebraska, Omaha's trash site that you aren't supposed to put dead animals in the trash because I used to do that, and then I started deciding for a pickup.
Yeah, so as far as I'm concerned, the last we have heard is that that is the protocol. I can pretty much tell you if you call Humane Society, they're probably not going to come out. I have referred people to the Humane Society personally, and unfortunately, it's nothing on their end. They just have so many things they need to do and so little animal control officers that unfortunately it's just kind of one of their last priorities. If you think an animal was diseased, they want to help you out, but there's just so many sick and injured and wounded cats and dogs and wildlife in our city that it's just not something they can always get to. Additionally, generally, there's not any reason. We've had people call too where they're like, hey, are you worried about disease risk? Do you want to come pick up this animal and like do a necropsy? Once again, that's just not, it's something we like to do eventually, but it's just not something that's really in our capacity right now. So that's a good question. Coming back around to that, I guess I would just call and double check with the city and see if that has changed. But to my knowledge, that is at this point in time what we're supposed to do. You can bury it, sure.
What I did do on 2 cases was bagged it and hung the bag on my trash again. I called Maine Society, gave my address, and when they were in the area,
Yeah.
they picked it up.
Yeah, and that can be too, if it's not like a time, quick thing, you can just put it on the curb. I am from Council Bluffs, actually, and so in Iowa, in Council Bluffs, you can even just put an animal not bagged on the curb and our trash people will pick it up. You can also bury it, of course. A lot of people think I found a dead animal. This is so weird. This has never happened to me before. It must be diseased. Something terrible is happening. But just remember to not necessarily think zebras when you hear hoofbeats. It probably just died of natural causes. Lots of things happen. It's a tough life out there for animals. Any other questions? Yeah.
Successfully rehoused.
2 years ago, we got our first armadillos. Yeah, so yeah, so armadillos can carry leprosy. As long as you use the proper PPE, it's fine. Don't eat their poop, basically. And so yeah, they're not technically considered native right now in our state, but they're moving up. Climate change, things are being able to withstand our climate much more. So yeah, that was kind of cool. 2 years ago, we got our first 9-banded armadillo. And then quickly after, we got a second one. And then the second one, while she was with us in rehab over the winter, had babies. So our first turned into our first 6 very quickly. Yeah. So we worked it out. We worked with some state organizations and took it back down south where they're kind of more. We think these guys probably, unfortunately, got on like trucks and were like transported up here. They don't generally stumble their way up here very often, and where they're found along the interstate, that just kind of made us think that they're from down south more. So yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah.
Should have turtles. What about frogs? We had a pond in our backyard. How do we get a frog back there?
Yeah, so frogs they'll lay eggs, right? And then they'll leave and then the eggs will hatch. And so it's interesting because a lot of times you might not see the adult frog, but they snuck in somehow eventually. And some frog eggs are pretty resistant to drying and they can withstand like, backyard ponds and stuff like that, and some aren't as much. So whether the viability of those eggs kind of pans out is tough. Potentially.
A baby wood duck in our back pond. How does that get
Yeah.
eggs?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think somebody just
Waterfowl are just the bane of our existence. They're so tough. Wood ducks, for whatever reason, I don't think someone put it back there necessarily. However, that's not to say that ducklings in general, it's hard sometimes to tell the species. And this is the time of year when everyone and their mom is like buying their little 2-year-olds baby ducklings for Easter, and then like in a month they'll be tired of them and put them out in a pond, and so like someone might have taken a domestic duck out, and so that happens. But wood ducks, for whatever reason, from coming out of, so they nest in trees, right? And then from coming out of their hole, somehow a couple of them, it seems like every clutch, just get confused and don't follow the rest of them. And so we'll find them in really weird areas. We'll find them wandering parking lots. We'll find them, yeah, in people's backyard ponds. And it's tough when you see, geese or ducklings, and they're trying to lead their babies across busy roads like this. It happens every year. And people call us and they want us to help. And if it's like a baby duck singularly, yes, we're going to step in. But if they're with mom, It seems super unsafe, but what we found is we go out and we try and chase them with nets and we try and catch them. Like a lot of times the mom gets so stressed out that she dies. The babies get all of a sudden scattered. And so, if we can just let them do their thing, slow down in the springtime, try not and, hit them with their cars, keep our dogs away. They do dangerous, crazy things every spring. And that's just part of living in an urban center, part of living in a city, right? They have their babies not by water for whatever reason, and then they have to take their babies to water. So yes, they're very tough for us. Yes. Cool.
Like 10 years ago, a pair of geese laid their eggs right next to a pond with no shelter. They hatched and all lived. In the following year since, the couple lays their eggs in the same nest, but the raccoons keep getting to them. And basically the question boils down to, is there some way to deter them from laying eggs in the same spot? They tried putting a nest in the pond and they weren't interested. You'd think they'd eventually learn, but they're geese.
Yeah. First of all, hello, Debbie. This is my aunt. Um, yes. So my recommendation would be to, if you can kind of watch and see as they start building the nest, it sounds mean, but just keep destroying it. If birds build nests commonly in like the wreath on your door or in an area that's really unhealthy or unsafe, as long as there's not eggs in the nest, you can just keep dispersing those sticks, keep breaking that nest apart, and eventually she'll be like, oh my gosh, I got to start somewhere else, right? That being said, another thing a lot of people don't know too is that under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which is federal law, it is federally illegal to tamper with, harm, move, disturb active bird nests. So nests that have an egg in them cannot be changed, moved, whatever around, unless it is a direct threat to human life. So the biggest one we see this year is like it's in your dryer vent. It could start on fire. You can actually move the nest, like just relocate the whole thing, right? When we talked about making your own nest, you can just move it. We can talk you through that. Give us a call. But yes, if birds start nesting in areas that are unsafe or places you don't want, my biggest recommendation is just keep destroying that nesting material as long as there's no eggs. So just be careful. And so eventually she'll just be like, oh gosh, I got to start somewhere else. This is not working. Um,
Raccoon can't build or
Yeah, it's kind of tough. Raccoons, they got hands and like they can do a lot. They're smart. And you would think would ducks would like learn that, but yeah, it can be tough because especially like I'm assuming the nest she's talking about is on the ground, so it's very easy to be caught. And even duck or wood duck nests that are up high, raccoons climb. Once again, they have little agile hands that they can grab things with. So yes, that would be my knowledge or my recommendation is just to keep breaking those nests apart as long as there's not eggs in them to deter her to make her have a nest somewhere else. Turns out those bird spikes you buy just really help them prop their nests up really great, so they're not really effective when you put them on things. Yeah.
When you have the rabbit nest in the yard, which I get,
Mm-hmm.
I take pains to avoid this spot with a mower. Yeah, I've got an electric mower or things like that, but the thing that you wonder about is, if they would ever abandon or even like you're told as a kid to eat all their babies if they get too stressed.
Yeah. So generally that is a myth. So you can even run over baby bunnies with a lawnmower, and as long as they're mostly uninjured, we've had some earless ones that she'll just like keep taking care of as long as they're fine. What I generally tell people is like a lot of times when you mow, you kind of do a quick surveillance, make sure there's not sticks or anything you're gonna run over. When you do that, just double check if there's baby bunnies. If there is, you can take even just like a little Easter basket or an ice cream bucket and just put it over top of them. Anything even that small just to help you go around them. But yeah, that being said, you can handle baby rabbits, you can do all kinds of stuff, and generally the mom's not going to get too stressed out and go psycho and eat her babies.
Like when you mow,
Yes, and then take it off. Yes. Just pop it over top of them and then take it off. Yeah. Yeah, anything that you're gonna keep more permanently. So for say like keeping away from your dogs, you want it to be more ventilated and you want that area for the mom to come in and out. That being said, also wild animals are stressed, right? And so don't just because I said that, don't be like, oh, I can teach my neighborhood kid about baby rabbits and scoop them up and like show them the whole neighborhood because they can get stressed and they can literally die from stress. So if you don't have to, please try to leave them alone. Awesome. Yeah, I'll be around for a little bit after this if anyone has questions.
Frontier, or 50% sell off of everything in the store. Yes. So, let me get this right. Animal activities, animal puzzles, books, and toys. If you don't want to shop tonight, you can pick up this card in the front desk. It's good for a week. So then you can come back anytime and redeem that offer in a week. And also for you, as a special note, this is for animals and birds only. We've got some walnuts up there for your furry friends and your bird friends, not for human consumption. It's untreated. That's all the walnuts for your animals. And probably 13% of every proceed from tonight and throughout the week with this card will be going to Nebraska Wildlife
Aww,
Rehab.
thank you.
Donations as well. I would like to speak to you for a second. And once again, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'll be here for another 15 minutes if you have other questions. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm just gonna think I've been working here for 17 years, and this has been a dream of ours. It's really been quite good. And we just kind of we're diving into it head first. So this is only our third event, and every event we learn something new that we need to fix for the next event. And then the past ones you've seen that we have done that, but we were not taking into consideration the daylight savings and that sun coming in the window, so that will be thanks to our home drinking. So I also want to say that I've personally witnessed a lot of the work you guys have done, and I've worked with you, or I've been associated with you guys for the past at least 15 years. You've saved a lot of families for me. And if you can think of anything that we can do to make this better, we want to get better. And we take all of your constructive criticism very seriously. We want this to be something that you get something out of. If we need to market it a different way, or if we need to do something different to make this better for you guys, we'd like to hear from you. Or any ideas for any future seminars that you would like to see us put on, because we love some ideas as well. And just keep it, as long as you have your email or your cell phone number, we're doing, I think, up to 2 events every month for the rest of the year. So we got a lot more coming. So thank you guys for coming, and we're just here to help and here for any questions that you might have.
Absolutely.